Introducing AirMeet, an all-in-one virtual and hybrid events platform designed for high engagement with an attendee-first approach. Now double your leads and revenue by customizing your event with interactive features, branding, analytics, and audience insights, while enjoying up to 98% attendee retention.
Welcome back to the Customer Success Festival. Before we get going with the next helping of inspiring content, we'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors for helping us bring this event to your screens. And don't forget, you can access even more content to elevate your CS knowledge by becoming a CSC member. Simply head on over to our website to find out more. Now sit back and enjoy the next session.
Hi everyone, my name is David Collard. I have the absolute pleasure to lead a team of wonderful customer success managers at LinkedIn. Now, my team works on the LinkedIn sales solution side of the business. We support a tool called Sales Navigator, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Now, what I'm going to be talking to you about today is all about talent. To be honest with you, we are hiring at the moment, so this is very much front and center of mind for me right now. But I also come from this background. I used to be a recruiter. I joined LinkedIn initially to work on our recruiter product, which I'm sure many of you are also familiar with. But what I also have, which I'm obviously very privileged to have as a LinkedIn employee, is access to some of the world's best data. And what I'm going to do today is talk through some of this information, this data with you. We're going to look at customer success talent globally. We're also going to look at it in the UK, because that's where I'm based. That's where this team, the Alliance, is based. So I thought that would be interesting. And then I'm going to talk through some best practices. Some ideas around what kind of things we should be looking for in CS talent, how to try and access that talent, and then once you've accessed it, how do you go about hiring? So I hope this is all useful to you, and I'm going to kick off right away by digging into some, I think, rather interesting data. I'm just going to take a moment to explain what this data is. So these are LinkedIn members who have stated on their profiles that they work in a certain role. And the roles that I've grouped together for this analysis are all customer success roles. They are titled as customer success. So that may be customer success managers, customer success specialists, executives, etc., the whole pantheon of customer success job titles. And globally, we're finding about 210,000 of them. Now, the massive majority of these folks are in the US. That's no huge surprise. That was the country, after all, that gave us our industry. So no surprise to see that most of them are there. I'm going to walk through some of this information, some of this data with you now, and try and give you some call outs that may give you perhaps some insights into the way the market is moving. First thing to call out is just how swiftly it's growing. Okay, so 210,000 people, that's up 16% on last year. So in just the past year, an additional 33,000 individuals have gone on LinkedIn and said, yes, I work in that industry. That's a huge number, and it shows no sign of slowing down at all, which is great news for us already in the business, right? The other thing I'd call out is just how many people have moved jobs. Okay, 75,000 of these 210,000 people have moved jobs in the past year. That speaks of a really demanding market, and this is very true globally. In most of the big global centers in the States, in Europe, and in India in particular, there's huge demand for customer success talent. I'd also like to call out the gender side of things. Now, just for reference here, this is not people stating that they are one gender or another. This is inferred gender based on people's names. So an algorithm will have a huge database of names from all different countries, nationalities, backgrounds, etc. And with well over 90% accuracy, it will be able to say if people are male or female. So I just wanted to call this out because personally, I'm really proud to be working in an area where there is at least parity between men and women. And if we look up and down the seniority stack as well, it tends to hold up pretty well. I'm not saying that we've cracked this, that there's no issues in terms of gender pay gap, or that we can stop working on this now. But just to highlight, I think it's nice to work in an area where we've got a good distribution, a good balance of male and female talent. So let's move on and have a quick look at these skills. Now, I've highlighted a few here because I found them interesting. Broadly speaking, when we look at the skills of any individual in any role in any company, they tend to fall into a few different buckets. There are the skills that you have to have in order to do the job, in order to be able to function. Okay, and that's true across customer success roles, in this case, in almost any company. And that's why you see things like CRM usage. Salesforce is up there as the largest and most ubiquitous CRM. Customer satisfaction, customer experience. These are common skills that run across multiple different industries and different products, different geographies. I would, however, suggest that if you are hiring, then these are not particularly good skills to be looking for necessarily, and I'll tell you why. It's because they're incredibly imprecise. What counts as customer satisfaction as a skill at one company may not at another. Sure, hire based on Salesforce knowledge if that's useful to you, but I'd also suggest that the level of Salesforce knowledge or the details of a Salesforce instance will vary a lot from one company to another. So yeah, it's not a bad thing to look for, but it may help you less than you think. The final thing to call out here is the three things I've highlighted. So data analysis, analytical skills, and sales management. Now, the top two of these point to a growing trend. I mentioned that the majority of these 210,000 people are based in the US. Now, given that the US tends to set the trends for the rest of the world, I think this is really worth taking notice of, especially as we'll see in a moment, these key skills aren't on the top 10 for the UK and not for a number of other countries either. I would therefore suggest that if the US is increasingly gearing up to make CSMs responsible for sharing data, analyzing data, telling clients about what their data means, then that's a trend that is going to spread and spread quickly. So if you want to be ahead of that trend, I'd start looking for those people with this skill set right away. The final thing here is sales management. Now, this is a really interesting one, and this is I'm going to speak to this throughout this talk. The different types of customer success roles at different companies demand different skills, sure, and one of the biggest differences is in how you define where a customer success role begins and ends and a sales role begins and ends. Okay, some companies like their CSMs to not own the commercial relationship. Others like them to own the renewal, but not upsell, and others want them to own upsell as well. The fact that sales management is such a high percentage and is in the top 10 globally indicates to me that this trend for renaming relationship managers or account executives as customer success managers, that trend is not slowing down at the moment, and we're seeing increasing numbers of CSMs doing sales type roles. Now, I've chosen to focus on the UK, as I mentioned. It's where I'm based, it's where the Alliance is based, so I thought this would be an interesting kind of compare and contrast. Obviously, we are looking at a much smaller talent pool here. We're looking at about 15 or 16,000 people. We are looking, though, at a population that's growing faster than the global average, 20% compared to 16% globally. We are also looking at group of professionals, even more of whom are moving on an annual basis. So 37% of CS professionals in the UK changed jobs in the past year. That's huge. That really is. That as part of a talent pool, that's absolutely massive, especially given that it's a talent pool that's growing so swiftly. Really exciting time to be part of this group. Gender diversity as well, also holding up strongly in the UK. Very nice to see, very pleased about that. Slightly closer to 50-50 than the global number. But like I said, just really glad to be part of an industry, of a sector where we don't have big kind of chasms between the number of men and women doing certain roles. One other thing to call out here before I move on to the skills is the interesting regional information that I managed to pull from this data. I dug a little bit deeper, and as you would expect, London does have the largest group of CS professionals in the UK, 47%. So very nearly half of all these 15,000 folks are in London. But that group is growing at 17% year on year. 17% more in London this year than last. But that's nothing compared to some of the regional centres in the UK, which is fantastic. Manchester's growing at 29% year on year, Newcastle at 31%, and Bristol at 36% year on year. Now, as somebody who likes the idea of having people work where they're most comfortable, I think this is wonderful. But what does it mean for you? Well, it's clear, as we all know, this is not news, that the trend to work at least part of the time from home is here to stay. I'm at home right now. It's not going away. We also work generally in an industry in SaaS that makes this possible. We don't have to physically be present a lot of the time. What this means for you, though, if you're looking for talent, it really does show that you need to be able to compete in this market, where increasing numbers of companies are saying, look, you can be fully remote if you like, or we'll buy access to an office, a shared office space. So if you want some companionship and some people to chat to, you can go in, but you can do that in the place that's closest to you, in Bristol or in Newcastle. If you'd like to live near there, go for it. Point is, it's now a competitive edge. And if you're not being competitive with that, you are not going to be able to access the full range of talent within the UK. The other thing I'd call out here, so similar in the global numbers to the sales management here, we see new business development being in the top 10, just about in the top 10 skills listed for CS professionals in the UK. Also indicative of the same trend, right? New business development is not typically a skill that I would personally associate with CSMs. It's not what I would look for in my team. It's not what I'm searching for right now in the talent I'm speaking to. But there is this trend for CS titled roles to increasingly take on what would traditionally be viewed as a sales job in upsell, cross-sell. So just something to be aware of. Again, if you're searching for people based on their job title, you may not get what you're looking for, because an increasing number of them are actually doing a BD or a sales role. So the other thing I'll call out here is the three things highlighted in blue, apart from new biz: recruiting, cloud computing, and digital marketing. Now, these are industry-specific, domain-specific skills that are really high on the list in the UK. Now, partly this points to the the specifics of our market in the UK, the types of firms that employ CSMs that are present here. Fine, great. But what it also shows, and it really helps me to demonstrate my next point, which is all around how do you go about finding these people, and what kind of talent is there that you should be looking for, is that clearly in the UK, there's quite a big emphasis on not just hiring people with CRM knowledge, customer success knowledge, whatever that may mean, but we're hiring for domain-specific knowledge and expertise, which for me is critical, absolutely business critical, to make sure that your teams have that skill set in their armory if they're going to be successful. So let's talk about skills. Now, originally, the catch phrase, or the phrase that I heard was, it's skills, not schools. And this was all about not just trying to hire from the top universities, but hiring for people who've developed certain skills. So I've borrowed this and said, hire for skills, not titles. And I'd like to think this is obvious, but one CSM in one company is not the same as in another. Just as the same here, I've demonstrated that a gourmet pastry chef is not the same as somebody working in a fast food chain. They may both be called chefs, but they do very, very different jobs. This is why you have to be absolutely crystal clear about what you're hiring for and the skills that are going to make somebody in that role successful. Now, it's not saying that one of these is better than the other, but they are very, very different. If you're working in a fast food chain, you have to, I'm sure, be used to working in a much faster paced environment. You've got to get things out the door quickly. You've got to be able to cover multiple stations. Whereas as a pastry chef, precision is all important. Perfectionism is much more important. So what does this mean for CS? Right, so we need to be looking at, I believe, domain expertise as an absolute core integral part of the skill set. And by domain expertise, what do I mean? Well, if, like me, the product that you work with or your team works with is around sales, having people either with sales experience or sales consulting experience is invaluable, because it's not something that can be taught quickly. Anyone who joins your business is going to have a learning curve. They're going to need to adapt to your CRM, to the way you do business, to all of the new acronyms that you use specifically in your company. They can do that, and they'll do it over the course of a few months. You cannot pack a decade's worth of sales knowledge and know-how into an onboarding program. It's just not possible. So that's why domain expertise and knowledge is right at the top of my list when I'm hiring. Other things to consider are where this CSM fits in on the spectrum of CSMs. And there's a few things that we can look at here. What I've jotted down is looking at the client journey stage. So a very different skill set and expectation for somebody who's really focused on onboarding, bringing a client through the first 30 days, 60 days, whatever it may be for you, versus somebody who is expected to hold a long-term, multi-year relationship to enable a large renewal after 3, 4, 5 years. That's a very different ask, very different skill set and expertise that you're going to be looking for. Also, on the spectrum of CSMs, you have the more and less technical. In some companies, a CSM is going to need to do basic coding, and they're going to need to work with IT professionals at the client to make sure an integration is working properly. At other companies, or in my team, I can share that there's no need for that. As long as people can use a computer, that's fine. They don't need to know how it actually works. And then finally, we come back again to the commercial ownership. Where on this spectrum of no commercial ownership versus renewal plus upsell is your person going to be sitting? That's going to have a massive impact on the type of individual that you want to hire. So once you're clear about the skills that are going to make someone successful, and you can probably see this through looking through your current team, what are the commonalities that they have, and what are the special skills that make this person do the job really well in their way and this person do the job really well in their way. Once you've got an idea of this and you know what skills you're going for, how do you go about getting the message out there? Well, the important thing I believe here is to have a nice variety of talent avenues. Again, look, this is not rocket science. This is not something I've just come up with. This should be common knowledge, but it bears repeating. It really, really does. There are so many people out there who just post a job on one site and think that that's going to be enough. The truth is that you need to look for both that passive talent, and you should be doing that on multiple platforms. If you're over reliant on one, you're going to massively reduce the talent pool that you're able to access. So posting a job on multiple sites is critical. Laying the groundwork for that job ad, I would argue, is even more critical. And that's the point about employer brand. You need to be cultivating your employer brand well in advance of ever actually posting a job. By that point, it's too late. People have either heard of you or they've not. They've either formed a good opinion or a bad opinion of you. And if you've just not done anything, then I'd suggest that they're just ambivalent towards you, and your job ad is not going to stand out in, as we've seen, a very crowded marketplace with a lot of demand for these people. So make sure that you get that work done well in advance. So what we're going to talk about in the other points here is more around the passive talent rather than the active talent that you're likely to attract through your job ads. And there's a few things to point out here. As I said, I'm not going to be teaching anyone anything new here when I say that referrals are really important. They really are. For me personally, they speak to the strength of my employer brand internally. If people are aware of me and my team, what we're doing, I find that a real vote of confidence that I'm doing things well. Just one small thing to note about referrals, though, and that is that if you are overly reliant on referrals, there's, I guess, a bit of a risk that you could end up with too many people who are too similar. And the reason for this is just that people tend to be friends with people who are similar to themselves, with similar past experiences, for example. And if you are therefore overly reliant on this sourcing channel, then you're going to end up with basically a group of mates who went to uni together or who all worked at the same company together. And that you could end up then with a slight narrowness of vision, of thought, of experience, and that's not what anyone wants. So try and get referrals, try not to be overly reliant on them. Tapping up your own network is really important, and it's a great way to get good candidates. Speaking from personal experience with this, the role I'm hiring for at the moment, a great candidate came through and I reached out to my old boss and said, you know, any chance you've met anyone who you think would be a good fit for my team? And because they know what it takes to hire good people into LinkedIn and into this kind of role, they were able to identify someone really strong they put them in touch with. Now, the final thing on this list, I put the kind of asterisks around good agency recruiters. I used to be an agency recruiter, so I feel very confident in saying there are some brilliant recruiters out there. There are also some pretty terrible ones, so try to only work with the good ones. Couple of pointers for how to spot the good agency recruiters. One is just word of mouth. If you hear from other candidates or hiring managers that people are good to work with, tends to be the case. Secondly is experience. People often claim to be an expert in a certain field after only a few months, and that's obviously not possible. And the final thing is to look for people who have experience of doing the job that they're recruiting for. I mentioned before that you can't rush learning these kind of experiences, and it's true in recruiting as well. So somebody who knows what a CSM is going through day to day, week to week, and month to month is probably going to ask you more of the insightful questions, get more of a feel for the nuance of the role, and therefore be able to find better candidates for you. I'm not saying this is always going to work, but if you're looking to work with specific recruiters, those would be my top tips. So you found a great, big talent pool of CSMs. How do you go about hiring the best one? Now, I've just jotted down a few things here which are really important to me personally. I really like to try and make sure that there's a fair and consistent process. And the reason for this is I feel like it levels the playing field. It helps to remove bias from any recruitment process, and there's always going to be bias in there. Okay, you're dealing with people here, individuals, and we are walking, talking bias machines. So trying to have a really clear, transparent, systematic approach helps to reduce some of that. Some things to think of here in terms of when you're looking at your process, what might make it more or less fair. Making sure that internal and external candidates have access to the same kind of information, and that you're not judging candidates overly on things like how well they know all of your internal acronyms or the processes, things like that. The same as if you're going to meet people face to face, try and meet everyone face to face. That's the kind of thing I'm thinking about. When I'm talking about bias as well, I'd like to speak about my point here about making swift decisions. Now, I actually did some research into this a couple of years ago and ended up speaking to a fascinating professor at a university in the UK who talked about memory, and he works with police forces about the reliability of witness statements after the fact. And we spoke about how the human brain is an incredible thing. It's an incredible machine, it's often described as, but unlike machines, it is incredibly fallible. And the brain actually fills in gaps in memory with what we think should have happened or probably happened or would be likely to have happened. And our brain does this to try and be helpful, but when you're trying to accurately remember what somebody said and why you formed a certain opinion of them in an interview, it's incredibly unhelpful. And the longer the distance between the event and you trying to record the event accurately, the greater this problem becomes. So one of the things that I am really strict with myself and anyone else taking part in the interview process about is making swift, accurate notes and coming to decisions quickly. I will never put down my notes any later than 24 hours. That's my personal target. But it is with the purpose of trying to remove bias, because the longer I leave it, the more likely my biases are to creep in. Final couple of things. So in terms of building knowledge as you go, this is just about good candidate experience. And it's imperative that you have good candidate experience. This is not just CS specific, but across the board. Try to build your knowledge of the CSM as you go along by sharing good notes with each other and saying what you would like them to dig into more. And they can tell you. So the first interviewer maybe spots a potential gap around knowledge around CRM. So they say, if I had more time, I would have dug into this a bit more. So the next person does. You then form a more holistic, detailed view about people rather than them having 5 or 6 interviews, all in each of which they answer a variety of questions on basically the same topic, the same question phrased in different ways. Now, the bottom 2 points here is all about honesty. Honesty with the candidate and honesty with yourself. You have to be honest with the candidate about where the challenges are in your team and in your company and with your product. If you're not, they are not going to be successful because they will walk in on day one and feel like they've been lied to. You're then going to have a turnover problem. And being honest with yourself, this is around where the gaps are, because believe me, anyone you hire is going to have a gap. Unless they've done this exact role for you in this company before, they're going to have some gaps in knowledge. And even if they have, things will have changed since when they were there, so they'll have things to learn. Being honest with them and with yourself about where they're going to need to ramp up and where that energy is going to need to go, that is going to save you a lot of time in the long run, and it's going to help their onboarding experience immensely. This is it. I hope that this has been useful to you in looking at the incredible talent pool that we have in CS, some of its vagaries, its differences, and how it's starting to evolve, as well as some tips about how to engage with this talent and hire this talent when you need to. Please do feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, of course. I'm always open to chatting with people about anything around customer success, so do drop me a line. Take care and thank you.